3 to 6 questions. That is roughly how many performance-based questions stand between you and a Security Plus pass, and they are the very first thing you see when the exam loads, before a single multiple-choice question. They are worth more than a normal item, and most people walk in having never actually built a firewall rule or read a log. And here is the move nobody plans for. You can flag a simulation, leave it half-finished, and come back with your remaining time, which means the smartest play is often to not solve them first at all. Stay with me, because that one timing decision saves more passes than any flashcard.
This is Professor Erica, and let me put the exam structure on the record precisely because the numbers matter. The SYO 701 exam is a maximum of 90 questions in 90 minutes, and you need 750 on a scale that runs from 100 to 900. The performance-based questions, the PBQs, are the interactive ones where you do the task instead of picking a letter from a list.
Hi everyone, I'm Cynthia, and I want to say the part out loud that the study guides skip. It is completely normal to feel your stomach drop when a firewall console appears on screen instead of 4 nice answer choices. That fear is the real enemy here, not the material, and by the end of this you will have seen every shape these questions come in, because the secret is that there are only a handful of shapes. CompTIA Reese's, the same families over and over. Once you have built one firewall table and read one log by hand, the next one is just different words on the same skeleton.
I am Liam, and my honest read going in was that the panic comes from not knowing what is coming. So can we just name them all up front? My guess is there are about 5 real types and everything else is a variation.
That is exactly right, and naming them is half the cure. There are 5 recurring PBQ shapes on this exam, and I want to draw them so the whole landscape fits on one board before we go deep on any single one.
Let me set the board up for Erica, because seeing the full map first is the whole point. Think of it the way you would survey a chessboard before touching a piece. You do not react move by move, you take in the whole position, then you know which fight to pick first.
Here are the 5. Firewall and access list builds, where you order rules in a table. Log analysis, where you spot the attack in the lines. Network topology, where you place devices on a diagram. Drag and drop matching, where you sort controls or attacks into categories. And command and output reading, where you interpret what a tool printed.
And notice none of those are about memorizing trivia. Every one of them is a small task you can practice until it feels routine. A firewall table is just deciding what gets in. A log is just a story told in timestamps. We are going to solve a real example of each out loud.
And there is a reason these carry extra weight on your score. A multiple-choice question proves you can recognize an answer. A performance-based question proves you can actually do the job, which is what an employer is really buying when they see this certification on a resume. That is why CompTIA puts them first and weights them heavier.
And that maps to the objectives we have already been building toward. Firewall rules and access lists live in Objective 4.5, log data lives in 4.9, and topology and control mapping pull from the architecture and concepts domains. A PBQ is just those objectives with the training wheels off.
Before we open the firewall console, there is one question that shows up under nearly every video on this topic, and it frames the whole episode. Liam, you have had your hand up since the word panic, so go ahead and put it to the room.
Yes, and it is the one keeping people awake. Are the Security Plus PBQs really that hard, or do people just panic and run out of time? That is what I actually want to know before we start.
Hold that exact question in your head, because the honest answer is the second one, and everything we show you tonight is built to remove the panic. The content is teachable in an evening. The composure is what we are really after. Let us start where the fear is loudest, the firewall build, and watch it turn into something almost boring.
The firewall build is the PBQ people fear most, and it is the one with the cleanest rules. A firewall reads its rule list from the top down, and the first rule that matches the traffic wins. Nothing below that match is ever consulted.
And that single fact, first match wins, is the whole game. It means order is not cosmetic, it is the answer. Place your pieces in the wrong sequence and a rule you wrote correctly never gets a turn.
So let me walk a real example slowly the way I wish someone had walked me. The exam console is just a row per rule with a source, a destination, a port, and an action of allow or deny. It hands you a half-built table and a few requirements, and your whole job is to place and order the rows.
And that framing already lowers my heart rate. It is not a coding test, it is a sorting test. So give us the requirements and let me try to predict the rows before you reveal them.
I love that. Picture a small company. The requirement is simple. Let the public reach the web server on the secure web port, let the admins reach it for remote management, and block everything else. 3 sentences. We turn each one into a row.
Here is the rule set built correctly. Watch the order because it is doing all the work. The specific allows are on top, and the broad deny is on the bottom, right where the implicit deny would already be.
So my read is that Rule 1 lets the world reach the website over 443, Rule 2 lets only the admin network in over 22 for management, and Rule 3 slams the door on everything else. Is the port the part most people get wrong?
The ports are exactly where they lose points, so memorize the shortlist cold. 22 is SSH and 53 is DNS. 443 is secure web and 445 is SMB file sharing. 3389 is remote desktop. A question that says allow secure web while you open 80 instead of 443 is an instant miss.
Now let me show you the trap, because the exam builds the table to tempt you into it. This is the same 3 rules with the deny moved up 1 spot. It looks tidy, it is broken.
Read it the way the firewall does. Admin traffic comes in. Rule 1 does not match, wrong port. Rule 2 matches everything, so it denies and stops right there. Rule 3, the admin allow is sitting just below it and never gets a turn. The admins are locked out of the very server they manage.
And here is what makes it so cruel on exam day. Nothing errors. No red warning pops up to tell you the rule is dead. The table just looks complete and correct. Liam, I can see you have been sitting on a question through this whole trap, so go ahead and put it to Cynthia.
Yes, and it is the thing I always second guess, so let me ask it straight. If the implicit deny already blocks everything, why would anyone ever write the explicit deny all as Rule 3 at all?
Such a good question, and the answer is logging and clarity. The invisible implicit deny usually drops traffic silently, so you get no record of what was blocked. An explicit deny all that you wrote can be set to log, so now you can see the attempts, and it makes your intent obvious to the next person reading the table. The behavior is the same, the visibility is not.
So the solve method for any firewall PBQ is 3 steps. Translate each requirement into 1 row. Put the most specific allows at the top. Let the deny all live at the bottom. Then read it once as the firewall would top down and confirm every requirement still gets its turn.
Specific over general, allows before the deny, and always reread top to bottom. That is the entire firewall family. Next comes the one that looks scariest and is actually the most satisfying to solve. The wall of log lines. Before we keep going, one small favor that actually moves the needle. If this is landing for you, tap like, then subscribe and turn on the bell so you do not miss the rest. 2 taps, completely free, and it pushes this in front of more people who need it.
A log analysis PBQ drops a wall of text in front of you and asks one calm question. What attack is happening here? It looks overwhelming, but a log is just a story told in timestamps, and your job is to find the one line or the one pattern that does not belong.
And you do not read every line. You scan 3 columns like a chess player scanning ranks and files. Who is talking? That is the source address. When? that is the timestamp. And what happened, that is the result or status code. The attack almost always announces itself as a sudden repetition.
That reframe is everything because 100 lines stops being 100 problems. It becomes one question. Which line or which group of lines breaks the normal pattern? Everything else is just background you can skim right past.
Exactly, so let me give you the most common one they test. This is an authentication log from a Linux server. Read it the way Cynthia just described, source, time, result, and watch for the moment normal turns into a flood.
Okay, my read jumps right out. Same source address, dozens of failed passwords across different usernames, all inside about 3 seconds. That is someone hammering the door. And the last line is the gut punch because it says accepted. They got in.
That is a textbook brute force attack, and the exam wants the precise reasoning, not just the label. The fingerprint is many failures, one source, multiple accounts, a tight time window. In the attack framework the industry uses, this is cataloged as Technique T1110 brute force, and we can pull up that exact record. This is the public attack knowledge base that defenders map their logs to. The page describes brute force exactly as we read it, guessing credentials through repeated attempts. When a PBQ shows you that pattern, this is the name and the reasoning behind your answer.
And the trap on a log question is the scary word reflex. People see the word failed and panic and pick the most dramatic answer on the list, like ransomware or a 0 day. Slow down. Pick the attack the lines actually prove. The log shows failed logins from one address against many accounts, so the answer is the attack made of exactly that, brute force, not whatever sounds scariest.
And there is a sibling the exam loves to contrast with this. If you saw the same flood but one password tried against many different usernames, that is password spraying, not classic brute force. My read is they want you to notice the direction of the attack, many guesses at one account versus one guess at many accounts.
Let me show you a second flavor, because they also test web logs, and the giveaway is different. This is an access log from a web server. Same method, scan the request itself this time.
My read on line 2, the single quote breaks the query and the server throws a 500 error. Then line 3 adds or 1 equals 1 and suddenly gets a 200. That is the SQL injection we covered in its own episode, fishing for a query that is always true.
Precisely, and the fourth line is a bonus the exam loves to stack in. That angle bracket script tag in the address is cross-site scripting, a different injection aimed at the browser. One log, 2 attacks, and your reasoning is identical for both. Find the line that does not look like normal traffic, then name the technique it matches.
And that fifth PBQ family we named at the start, the command and output type, is really the same skill pointed at a tool instead of a log. They show you the output of a scan or a command and ask what it proves. My read is that if you can read a log, you can read a tool's output because both are just lines of evidence.
That is the right instinct. Picture the results of a port scan that lists port 22 and port 443 open on a server. The question might ask which service is exposed or whether remote desktop is reachable. You are not running the tool, you are interpreting what it already printed, exactly like reading the result column in a log.
So the whole log family reduces to a calm routine. Scan source, time, and result. Find the repetition or the line that does not belong. Then match the pattern to the attack it proves, never to the scariest word on the screen. The wall of text was always just one story with one villain.
Source, time, result. Then name what the lines prove. That is reading a log like an analyst instead of a panicked test taker. Next, we step back from the keyboard and look at the whole board because some PBQs hand you a map of the network and a pile of pieces. Two more PBQ shapes are really one skill, placing things correctly. The topology question hands you a network diagram and a pile of devices like a firewall, a web server, and a database. It asks you to drop each one where it belongs. The drag and drop question does the same with concepts. matching a control to its category or an attack to its defense.
And the principle behind both is identical. The exam is checking whether you understand where trust boundaries sit. A web server the public touches lives in one zone, a database full of secrets lives in another, and the firewall is the gate between them. Get the boundaries right, and the pieces almost place themselves. The drag-and-drop version just swaps the diagram for categories. You sort each control into preventive or detective or corrective, or you match each attack to the defense that stops it. Different surface, same recognition skill underneath.
But there is a real argument about how to prepare for these under time pressure, and it splits good instructors. So let me put it to the room. When the clock is bleeding, do you lean on memorized placements and pattern match fast? Or do you reason every piece from first principles? Liam, you have been itching to make the case for reasoning. Erica, you will defend the drilled pattern.
Reason it out every time. If you only memorize that the web server goes in the screen subnet, the exam reworks the scenario and you are lost. But if you understand why that the screen subnet is the buffer zone for anything the public touches, then any diagram solves itself. Understanding survives a reworded question. A memorized answer does not. The moment they add a mail server or a second firewall, the person who only memorized one diagram freezes, and the person who understands the boundary just keeps placing pieces.
Hold on, Liam. Put a clock on that. You have 90 minutes for 90 items. How long does reasoning every piece from scratch actually cost you on a 6-device diagram?
Longer, I will concede that. Maybe 2 minutes instead of 30 seconds. But a wrong fast answer scores the same as a wrong slow one, which is 0, and panic placing from a half-remembered pattern is exactly how people put the database in the screen subnet and fail the item.
And that is where I push the other way, because raw reasoning has a cost too. These questions come first, when your nerves are highest, and a tested pattern is a lifeline. You should already know cold that anything public-facing goes in the screen subnet and the database goes deep on the internal network. That is not memorizing trivia, it is owning the fundamentals, so reasoning has somewhere to stand.
So you would have people just memorize a diagram and hope it matches?
No, the opposite. The pattern is the foundation, the reasoning is the build on top. You recognize instantly that the public web server cannot sit next to the database, that is the pattern, and then you reason about the one piece the question made weird. Speed on the obvious buys you time for the twist.
Liam, name the cost of your side honestly before I rule. What does pure first principles reasoning actually risk on this exam?
Time and second guessing. If I reason every trivial placement from 0, I can burn 10 minutes on a diagram and talk myself out of a correct gut answer. That is the honest catch. Reasoning without a foundation is just slow doubt, and on a clock, slow doubt is how a candidate who knows the material still runs out of time.
Then here is the verdict, and you are both describing the same staircase from different steps. The standards settle it cleanly. CompTIA tests whether you can apply concepts, not recite them, so understanding is the goal. That the way you hit the goal under a 90-minute clock is a drilled foundation plus reasoning for the twist.
Which means the prep answer is both, in order. Drill the placements until the public-facing screen subnet and the protected internal database are automatic. Then practice reasoning so when the diagram adds a wrinkle, you adapt instead of freeze. The foundation makes you fast, the reasoning makes you right.
So if a question forces the single best prep strategy, the answer is understand the why, because that is what the exam rewards, and what survives a reworded scenario. But walk in with the common placements already drilled, so reasoning has a floor to stand on. Now let me turn all of this into the plan you actually run on exam day. Here is the exam day plan that turns all of this into a pass. The single highest value move happens in the first 30 seconds, before you solve anything. When the PBQs load first, you flag them, you skip them, and you go do the multiple choice questions.
And the reason is pure psychology, which matters more than people admit. The PBQs are slow and they are stressful, and if you grind one for 15 minutes right at the start, you have spent your calm and your clock on a single item while 60 quick questions wait. Bank the easy points first, build momentum, then come back to the Sims with most of the exam already in your pocket.
And that only works because of a feature people forget. And item PBQs you can flag, skip, and return, and your work is saved. So leaving one half built early costs you nothing. My read is that the skip button is the most underused tool on the whole exam.
One honest caution there, because the exam has 2 PBQ engines and they behave differently. Most are simulations you can revisit. But a virtual environment question runs inside a real operating system, and on those you generally cannot skip and come back. The fix is simple. Read the instructions on each PBQ so you know which kind you are in before you commit time.
Now the time budget, because the clock is the real opponent. Give yourself roughly 8 minutes per PBQ as a ceiling. If you are past it and stuck, place your best partial answer, flag it, and move. A half-correct firewall table or topology can still earn partial credit, so a messy attempt always beats a blank one.
And read the requirements twice before you touch anything. I tell every student to literally note the ports and the direction. Allow inbound 443. Block outbound to that subnet. Half of all PBQ mistakes are not knowledge gaps at all. They are simply misreading what the question actually asks for under stress, and a slow second read fixes more of those than any extra fact ever will.
Let me make that concrete with a real test taker. Picture Maya, a first-time candidate who knows her material cold but freezes when the firewall console loads. She sinks 20 minutes into rule ordering, never reaches the last 10 multiple-choice questions, and misses the pass by 20 points. Not a knowledge failure, a clock failure.
And Maya is the rule, not the exception, which is why the plan beats the panic. Same candidate, second attempt, flags all the Sims, clears the multiple choice in 40 minutes, then returns to the firewall table with 50 minutes and a steady hand. Same brain, same knowledge. The only thing that changed was the order of operations.
That detail reframes the whole exam for me. The PBQs are not a wall you climb at the start. They are a task you come back to once you have proven to yourself you can answer questions, and confidence is half the battle in that console.
And do not forget the reset button. On a simulation, if you have made a mess of a firewall table and you are tangled up, you can reset it to the starting state and try the ordering fresh. A clean slate beats fighting a table you have already broken, and almost nobody uses it. Which lets us bust the myth this whole episode has been circling. The myth is that performance-based questions require some elite hacker skill that ordinary candidates do not have.
Busted completely. Every PBQ we solved tonight came down to a small, repeatable routine. Translate requirements into firewall rows and order them. Scan a log for the repetition and name what it proves.
And that word routine is the comfort I want every nervous candidate to hold on to. A routine is something you have done before. The whole reason a PBQ feels terrifying is that it is the first time, so we take away the first time by practicing it at home.
Right. Place public-facing devices in the buffer zone and protect the database deep inside. None of that is genius. It is a checklist you can rehearse until your pulse stays flat. The elite hacker framing is the very thing that scares people out of practicing. And practice is the whole answer.
And rehearsal is the actual secret, not talent. The candidates who passed the PBQ section are simply the ones who built 3 firewall tables and read 5 logs at their kitchen table the week before, so the console on exam day felt familiar instead of frightening. The drill is free, and it is the single best return on study time in this whole exam.
If you forget everything else from tonight, remember this one move. Flag the PBQs, bank your fast points, and come back with time and a calm head. The candidates who fail this section almost never fail on knowledge. They fail on the clock, and the clock is the one thing this plan puts back in your hands. Let us lock in the one idea that carries the whole PBQ section. There are only 5 shapes: Firewall builds and log analysis, Topology and drag and drop, and command output. Every one of them is a small routine you can rehearse, not a talent you either have or lack.
Carry these solve methods into the exam. Firewalls read top-down, first match wins, specific allows above the deny all. Logs are read by source, time, and result, then named by what the lines prove. And the day itself is won by flagging the sims, banking your fast points, and budgeting about 8 minutes each.
Here's what you walk away and do tonight. Open any practice firewall table and order 3 rules from scratch, then read 1 sample auth log and name the attack out loud. 10 minutes of that and the console stops being scary because you have already done the thing the exam is about to ask.
Next time we put this to work end-to-end and walk a full incident from the first suspicious log line through the response, so you see how these same PBQ skills show up in a real security operations center, not just on the test.
If this finally made the PBQs feel solvable, subscribe and stay with the series, because we are building the One Security Plus playlist where you actually do every task instead of reading about it, and the free PBQ practice sims to drill all 5 shapes live at certs.professorerica.com.
Here is the one we want from you. Which PBQ type scares you the most going into your exam? The firewall build, the log wall, or the topology diagram? Tell us in the comments and we will point you to the drill that fixes it.
The quiet move is often the strongest. Do not underrate it. Take care.
Grace, that was the kind of teaching I usually charge for. 9 out of 10. This is Professor Erica. Thanks for watching and signing off.